Hello and welcome to Logan Sounds Off, where we talk about books, music, and a whole lot more. I'm your host, Logan Kelly. So welcome to Logan Sounds Off, and for those who don't know you, Steven, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, the reason why I think I'm on being interviewed by you is because I have a podcast with a friend of mine called Jason Carty, and it's a sort of a hobby, I suppose. But I work, my day job is as a lawyer, a solicitor.
Oh.
And I work in Belfast. And Jason, who does the podcast with me, he lives in Dublin and he's a doctor. So we do the podcast as a sort of a hobby, and because it's completely different from our day jobs.
So with your podcast, it's all about the Beatles.
Yes.
So I believe you discovered the Beatles when you were like 8 or 9 or something. I listened to your first episode, and it was
when I was very young.
Watching Help.
Yeah.
And I remember it was just like the man running along on the street with the knife. So how did you really discover them? Like, could you give us a more in-depth kind of explanation?
Okay. Well, I first remember being aware of the Beatles whenever I was about your age, maybe a bit younger than you, maybe 9 or 10. And one of they have a couple of films that they did whenever they were together, and one of the films is called Help. And I remember seeing that on my parents' television, and it was so long ago that the film was in black and white. And I just remember thinking the film was very funny and that the music was great. And then the next time I was out shopping with my mom, we were in, I think maybe in a big sort of shopping complex, and there was a record shop, and I asked my mom, could we buy a Beatles record? And I just picked the first one that I saw that had a nice cover, and it was a collection of their singles. And that was really that was the first time. Have you ever seen the film Help?
No, actually, I have not seen it.
It's a bit like a kind of spoof of James Bond, where they're being chased by people, and then they're running all over the world, and they're skiing, and then there's water skiing, and so it's a kind of parody of James Bond.
The movie, and people don't get this, is a spoof.
You're right.
And I go to the lads outside, that's a total spoof, and they're like, spoof? Because down here, not many people know what spoof means for some reason.
Yeah.
But why do you like the Beatles? Or like, what are your reasons of liking the Beatles?
Well, I think initially, whenever I just liked the songs. You know the way some people, you just hear a song and you don't even know why you like it. You just think that's a great song, and it's catchy, and it didn't sound like anything else, because this would have been 1973 or 1974, and all of my friends were listening to David Bowie or the Bay City Rollers and all those bands from the 70s.
Yeah.
And this just sounded, this was 10 years old at that time. The music was from 10 years previously, and it just didn't sound like anything else. And it was just really, really catchy. And I didn't really know who the Beatles were, and I didn't know they were a big, successful group. I just knew the songs from the film, really. I suppose I might have actually thought they weren't even a real band. They were a bit like a made-up band from the film, you know?
Oh, wait. Well, now they're something else.
They are. Do you know much about the Beatles yourself, or?
Well, I know like Paul McCartney and John Lennon, and then Ringo Starr was in the Beatles. I bet you I've left out one guy.
The one guy that you've left out is called George Harrison. He's my favorite.
Is he?
Right. And you left him out, and he's my favorite.
God, well, that is very embarrassing for an interview. But I know they had like a year ago on Disney Plus, they released a massive, like this was massive when it came out, massive documentary or something about them with loads of unseen footage.
That's right, called Get Back. And that was directed by Peter Jackson, who did the Lord of the Rings movies. And I think that the documentary was like 8 hours long. It was 3 episodes, and each episode was over 2 hours long. It was crazy. And that was a documentary. the Beatles started in 1962 and then they stopped in 1970. So it was really only 7 or 8 years that they were together. But in that 7 years, they put out 13 albums in 7 years.
Way.
And in Britain, they had 17 #1 singles in 7 years. So you think how often, whoever your favorite band is now, how many albums, they put years and years go past before they put out an album.
Yeah, like, I know, I'm going to give an example here. Like, I am into, this is one of the bands I'm into, an indie band called Gorillaz. And,
yes.
They released an album 2 years ago. It was massive. And they're usually really active, making like 2 albums a year. 2 years later, I'm still standing there tapping my foot waiting for them.
You see, in 2 years, the Beatles would have put out 4 albums, and they also put out singles, and the singles weren't usually on the albums. They were songs that they didn't put on albums. They put out. So so they just put out so much stuff in the 60s. It's very different now, where bands take a long time to put out records.
Yeah, usually this is like, it really annoys me whenever they just dish out singles for the hype, and I'm just like, release the album, please.
Yes, exactly. And sometimes the Beatles put out an album on a particular day, and the same day they would release a single, but the songs weren't on the album, so they were kind of like giving you extra stuff.
Bonuses.
Like a little bonus package with the album. Yeah.
So why did you start a podcast for the Beatles?
That's a very good question, because when I kind of became slightly obsessed with the Beatles, when I was a teenager. So I started listening to them when I was about your age, about maybe 9 or 10 or 11. And then all the way up into my teens, I was really, really obsessed with the Beatles. And I bought lots of books about the Beatles, and I read about the Beatles. And then when I got older and started working, your obsessions start to go away. And then my friend in Dublin said, there's a quiz being held in Dublin, and it's a Beatles quiz. And I think you and I and 2 of our other friends should form a team and enter the quiz. So I thought, okay. So we entered the quiz, and we didn't do very well. We came, I think, maybe 5th. And that, and I was a bit thinking, well, I thought I knew about the Beatles. So the next year we entered the quiz again, and we came 3rd. And then the next year we entered the quiz, and our 2 friends, they got fed up and they said, we're not doing it this year. So it was just me and Jason, and we won the quiz. And we got a kind of nice trophy. And then the next year we entered it again, and we won the quiz 2 years in a row.
If those 2 people are watching,
yes,
it kind of shows. But like,
I know what you want to say. They were holding us back, Logan.
I didn't want to say it, but you said it for me.
I think they were holding us back.
So was it like the quiz that made you kind of go, we should start a podcast, or did that kind of like, was it one of your points that kind of? It was the kind of thing that encouraged you.
It encouraged us, and Jason said, we should do a podcast. The next thing, we won this prize, and we've won it a 2nd year. We should do a podcast. And Jason had a cousin called Ado, and he works in sort of, he does podcasts, and he's a producer. So we went and spoke to Ado, and he said, yes, I think that might be a good idea. And we agreed we would do 10 episodes, just 10. And we thought, well, maybe, my mom and dad will listen to it, and we have some friends that might listen to it, and my brother might listen to it, but probably my brother wouldn't listen to it. And we thought, well, this will be interesting, and we'll just do 10 episodes. And we started the podcast, and people seemed to like it. And we got lots of emails and people on Twitter saying how much they liked it. And now I think somebody told me the other day, we have 121 episodes.
Wow. Just from 10 episodes, you just went, and you know what? Let's just do it for the crack.
It just kept
building up loads of them.
Exactly. It just kept going. And it was just, and we had, it's probably a bit like yourself. You have so much fun doing it. And you kind of like reading about it and putting the kind of little notes together for the episodes, and then, you know, editing it and putting it out. And then it's always very nice when you get tweets and emails and things from people saying, you know, oh, I really like that episode, or,
yeah,
you know, that's really nice to get that. But because so many people know a lot about the Beatles, sometimes we get emails and tweets saying, oh, that's not right, or you got that wrong.
Oh, there's always that one person who's gonna nail you.
Yeah, and you think, I always say, tell you what, if you didn't like it, we'll give you your money back, because it's free anyway. So, you know.
I can only, like, their response must be so funny. If imagine actually someone came up to you and went, I was listening to your podcast, are you sure about that? And telling them that, I can only imagine their face.
Yeah.
And now talking about your podcast, one of the most important things you've done on the podcast was you done a live podcast episode in Dublin, I believe.
We did.
Beatles, and what was that like now?
That was very exciting. But
that was back in 2019 with Jason, right?
Yeah, I was very nervous. I think we were both very nervous because it was in a place called the Workman's Club, which is like a sort of a pub, but it's got a big room at the back. And we didn't really know what to expect. And whenever we arrived, there were sort of about 80 or 90 people. And then we had to get on a stage, and just the two of us sitting, trying to do the podcast, talking to each other, but also realizing there were 90 people sort of sitting, watching us and waiting for us to make a mistake. Or have you ever done that? Have you ever done a live podcast or been on a stage?
No, but I know whenever I think of a live podcast, I just imagine you and Jason just talking with 90 people, just looking at you with notebooks, waiting to nail you.
Waiting to get, yes.
Every last word.
Absolutely. Well, do you, I see there are some guitars in the background. Do you play the guitar? You don't get up on stage and play the guitar, or?
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Or in school?
Guitar
a
year ago, roughly a year ago. I started in September, actually, a year ago, and I loved it. But that doesn't mean I'm that good at it. But I love playing the guitar sometimes, but I've never played for anyone.
So if Jason and I do another live podcast in Dublin this November, we've been asked if we would do one in November this year or maybe next year. So if we get asked to do that, I could ask you to come along and play some Beatles songs on the guitar beforehand. You could be like the warm-up act.
Oh, God. I can only imagine that. Oh, geez. There's kind of two outcomes. One, it's great, or two,
not so great.
Ruined. No more listeners on the podcast.
But I should ask you, how did you start your podcast? Because you've been doing your podcast, I think, longer than Jason and I have been doing a podcast. Were you 8 years old when you started doing your podcast?
Well, let me think, actually. To be honest, I haven't changed, except I've got a bit taller. To be honest, that's all that's happened in the last year. Probably 3 years. I probably started very similar time to you guys. And sorry, no. I would have started just before you guys.
You see, so you've been doing this even longer than us. So
veteran.
And what made you decide that you'd like to have a podcast?
To be honest, I've never kind of described it in this way, but I was a John Creedon wannabe. I always loved listening to John Creedon, and I wanted to be on the radio. And so I said, "Oh, Santa, please give me a little mic." And he gave me a mic, and then we bought a couple of parts, and we got I think my mom's ancient little laptop.
Yeah.
That was fighting for its life in it. and we plugged it up and booted it up. And I was on a Wednesday evening. I put on a song that went at the start that went, "There's a big rock show," and then I went, "Hello and welcome," and that's really when I started.
But it's because I've heard some of you, and you put a photograph up. You showed Jason, and you said, "Oh, I started when I was 8 years old school with a tape recorder."
You're right. I did. Do you know what? Before we booted up the laptop, it was on tapes, and they were little tiny tapes, and it was hilarious. And I remember doing my first one, and we sat everything on a chair, and I started recording, but the audio, because I was playing from like Spotify to like a tablet, and it sounded terrible, but it was so fun. And then we set up a desk over there, and we had a full-on like home studio thing going on there. It actually looked professional.
Yeah.
But it was nowhere near it. It was so fun though to do, messing about.
But that's the way. That's the way to start. And then
this was like maybe not 7, maybe 7 actually.
So
maybe 7.
So you definitely have more experience than I do in doing podcasts and radio.
You'd be surprised. Yeah, podcasts and radio and little tape recorders.
And do you think this? So is this because I mean, I do this as a hobby, but do you think this is something you might like to do as a job?
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah.
That's why I started. It was kind of like I kind of went, I'll give it a go, and I started to get a momentum in the last year because of that microphone. It's always going and going on me. But 3 years ago we started, and now we are on loads of social media platforms, websites in the works. We're on Spotify, we're on Google Podcasts, we're on Apple Podcasts, and we got 150 followers. So we're building up, and then we got 20 subscribers, I think, like that on YouTube.
We had 23
channel. Now we have 18 because 5 of them was my friend on loads of different devices.
Oh, okay, I see. So you have a YouTube channel as well. I haven't seen your YouTube channel. I shall have to check that out.
Yeah, that's basically all the videos on Spotify, just as videos.
Yeah. Well, we do that too. We put Jason has the YouTube channel, and he puts all the audio up there as well. The
little baby that I'm using here, the webcam, I only got that on the 23rd of July for my birthday. But we had to put up pictures because the video, I wasn't in the video. My little tiny face on the chair like this. So I use Audacity now to do the recordings.
Yeah. But it's very good. It's very, and one of the interesting things I wanted to ask you about, I was listening to your interview with Thomas Walsh.
Oh, that was so, tell you, continue, sorry.
Yeah, so and you said one of the first records you bought was Pink Floyd, The Wall.
Oh yeah. That was the first record.
The first record.
Next one was funny of Rolling Stones, a tiny little single, and then came along Nirvana, Unplugged, because I had never listened to that before. But what did you want to ask me about The Wall?
I was gonna ask you, have you bought any other Pink Floyd records? You were Thomas was selling you Dark Side of the Moon, and I wondered, you said, well, sometimes when I go into the shop and I think I'm going to buy Dark Side of the Moon, but then I think there's something else I want instead. Or
that still remains to this day as a very massive fact in my life. I do it all the time. I go, Dark Side of the Moon. Ooh, look at that. It drives me crazy. And I'm walking out going, damn it, Dark Side of the Moon. Walking out, it's actually hilarious. But no Pink Floyd, The Wall's the only one I had. And then I didn't know much Pink Floyd stuff. But that was like the first time we went CD buying. And he went, oh, we should get the best Pink Floyd. And I went, it's Pink Floyd. And he said, oh, it's amazing. And I just went, no, Dad. I picked up The Cure or something. And then I listened to Another Brick in the Wall Part 2, and I was just like, oh, I should have gotten Pink Floyd.
You see?
So that's why I got the wall.
And what did you think of the Rolling Stones single? Because I saw the Rolling Stones in concert about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and they played that song,
Living in a Ghost Town.
"Living in a Ghost Town."
Yeah, that was very like that was a really good single, and that was so lockdowny.
It really was, wasn't it?
And I bet you every single person who's alive during lockdown will listen to that and go, "Yep,
Yep, I get it.
Total sense. Do you remember them 5 kilometers?
Yeah.
Do you remember that physical distancing?"
And
yeah,
do you know
that was an amazing.
And do you know much about the Rolling Stones? Because they're the other band that I really like, as well as the Beatles.
I was actually going to ask you, for the next question, are there any other bands you like? Rolling Stones. Well, obviously Mick Jagger.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know him, and his singing's brilliant. I like some songs off Beggar's Banquet, and they released an album on 2019, Honk.
Honk, yes.
The kind of best of thing. And you know, Living in a Ghost Town, that's when that was first released.
Is that right?
I think it was actually released in that. But then they had to go, nobody knows about this song. And it's lockdown, so come in, Living in a Ghost Town, come on in. And then they released it as a single, I think. And then I liked some of the stuff now that they released. I remember I always thought I'd always be laughing my head off singing what's that song with the devil in it?
Sympathy for the Devil.
Yeah, Sympathy for the Devil. And I'd be going, pleased to meet you, while singing it with voice crack. And it's a very funny song. And then I'm just going, God, Mick Jagger, how do you do it?
How do you do it? Yeah, I really like the Rolling Stones as well. So maybe we should do a podcast about the Rolling Stones. That would be good.
I know, like now Bob Dylan, I think he was the name Rolling Stones for all of his songs. Like a Rolling Stone, so like the name Rolling Stone and the name Beatle and things like that are massive now. And I think they're kind of simple names, though.
I think so.
Rolling Stones and the Beatles.
Yeah, because if you think about it, you think the Beatles is a very silly name, and it must, because they've been around for so long and they're so big and they're so popular, nobody really thinks about the name. But if you imagine hearing that for the first time, that must have sounded very odd.
I'm going to be honest. I have something that I've never admitted, but the first thing that I think about when I hear the Beatles, surprisingly, is a little dinky Volkswagen Beetle.
Yes.
What comes into my mind?
Yeah.
A little Volkswagen Beetle, or I think of the picture, let's say, of the insect beetle, or Rubber Soul.
Yes.
Also, my uncle gave me a record case, and inside was a calendar of Rubber Soul.
Yeah.
And I always remember looking at the cover going, was that album cover supposed to be slanted? Looking at it with all the faces beside each other.
There's a really good story. Do you know how that happened?
No, actually.
They went, the photographer came and took all the photographs, and then he said, I've got some nice photographs that I think would be the album cover. I'll bring them round and show it to you. And the way he showed it to them, he put up a piece of white cardboard the size of a record cover, and he projected the photographs onto the cardboard so that they would see exactly what it would look like as a record cover. And while he was doing this, the cardboard sort of bent and distorted the picture. And all the Beatles just went, that's a great effect. Let's have that. And he was saying, no, it's all kind of stretched and weird. I said, no, we really like that. So it was a complete accident that the cardboard slipped while they were looking at the photograph.
This is why I love interviews. Weird conversations that make these interviews all the better. And then also have the little Rubber Soul logo in the top. I just think.
Yeah, they got an artist to do that, to sort of draw the lettering, because it's a very peculiar style of lettering.
Yeah.
in Rubber Soul. And that artist, years and years and years later, so maybe let's say 10 years ago, he still had all his original drawings of the lettering, and he took it to somebody, to like a big auction house, and said, you know, I was just wondering, I've got this, and people like to buy Beatles memorabilia and things to do with the Beatles. And he just took it in a, you know, like a Dunn's bag or something, or Quinsworth. He took it just in a shopping bag to the auction house, and they said, this is worth over £100,000. And he then put it up for auction, and his original drawings went for that sort of money.
Wow! Just by drawing Rubber
You
Soul in slanted writing with a little red pen, you can make 100,000 easy job. That's all you have to do nowadays. Get hooked up with a big band or a big solo artist and give them a weird slanted writing, and you're done.
And wait 50 years, and then you'll be rich.
Exactly. Now we're talking about the Beatles here on podcasting, and we can definitely see, and throughout your podcast as well, you're definitely into it. But are there any other interests that you have apart from podcasting and the Beatles? Apart from podcasting and the Beatles, that's a very tricky question. I like to read a lot. I see all these books behind me. I was just going, all those books. I like, Logan Sounds Off is about music and books. Wow. I hate going to bed without reading at least for 10 minutes with a book. I always read for 10 or 15 minutes before I go to sleep. Always. But you see everything on that shelf, you see all of those books? Yeah. Those books are all about the Beatles. Every single one. You see that? You're actually kidding. No, absolutely. Every single one of those books is about the Beatles. This just proves that you are the #1 fan of the Beatles. There is no bigger fan out there. I'm very proud of myself now, because for just a little second there, you were speechless. And I thought, I've made Logan Kelly speechless, you know. The next thing you know, I'll be fainting onto the computer. Donk. Wow, all of them books about the Beatles. That's reading thousands of pages. It's thousands and thousands and thousands of pages. Like, if there's literally a couple of thousand on each shelf. Probably, yeah. There could be nearly 1 million pages about the Beatles. But that's crazy. But you see, the first book I bought about the Beatles was probably when I was 11. So I'm 58 now, so I've been buying books about the Beatles for years and years and years. You're a collector. I'm a collector. I'm a book collector, yeah. But yeah, I do like to read. I like to read other things than just books about the Beatles. So I like history books. I like to read history, and I like sort of spy novels. If you've read John le Carré and things like that. So I like, or James Bond, those sorts of things. Yeah, I think like James Bond were originally books, and I think Dad read a couple of them. Yeah, and they were pretty good, like Dr. No and stuff. Dr. No and stuff. Have you ever read? I'm sure you've seen the film Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. It's the one movie that's on the list and has been for years. So I'm so sorry. The same. I know it's about like a child catcher. There's a child catcher and a car that flies. But the same person that wrote the James Bond film, but the James Bond books. So, which is very strange, because it's kind of, it's a sort of scary children's book, and that he wrote for his own children, but at the same time he was writing James Bond for grown-ups. Whoa. The James Bond writer wrote Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. A lot of people out there will be the exact same as me. Some James Bond people will just be like, God, I never knew that. You see, that's my other hobby, is just useless information. I just gather up lots and lots of strange facts. On this show, call it general knowledge. Let's give it a flashy name. It needs it. General knowledge. Because I tell you, when I set up these interviews, the main aim, get all the useless information out of this guy, or all the general knowledge, all this stuff that no one will know. And what's going to be your next move in podcasting? You're interviewing all these musicians. Ooh, probably finishing off the website with my mum.
Mm-hmm.
That's a massive aim that we'd like to get that up, and then we're gonna have an interviews with page.
Yeah.
That'll be fun to have all the names up there. But yeah, probably the website or the 3 other interviews, and then I'm reading a book at the moment called Show Bands and All That Jazz by my uncle's father, Des Hopkins, who the Beatles backed him.
Wow.
Yeah, the Beatles backed him, and I'm reading the book now, and I think I'm going to interview him after my holidays.
And did he sing with the show band, or was he play guitar or saxophone?
He was a drummer. He was a jazz drummer, and his son, Graham Hopkins, I talked to, and he played with a band called Therapy, and he played with Snow Patrol. And
I've seen Therapy. They're from Larne, aren't they? Yeah. They're up in Northern Ireland. Yeah.
On a Semi-Detached album. He is now one of the top 100 drummers in the world. So
wow.
And the drumming community is very well known. And then I went up to the studio, and hearing him play the drums, I was just like, oh yeah. He's so funny. And then I'm interviewing him. It's actually quite interesting, some of the stuff. Like
I wondered, was he playing with Therapy whenever I saw them years and years ago?
Like Semi-Detached, I think, was 1990s.
Mm-hmm. And his dad played in a show band that supported the Beatles, or the Beatles supported him.
Yeah, the Beatles supported him. So
that's a good thing. We should get him on our podcast to talk about the Beatles then.
Yes, exactly.
Well, what you should do is whenever you're interviewing him, you should ask him all about the Beatles, and then we can steal your interview and put it on our podcast. That would be.
We got a bit of stealing action going on.
we should make you our kind of like roving reporter to go out, and anybody that you interview,
bring a dictaphone everywhere.
Yeah, and if you interview somebody about the Beatles, we can put it on the podcast.
Question. You got any questions? Any extra questions for me?
Any questions for you? Well, I was interested to know when you started, and you told me that. And I was interested to know if you wanted to make this career. You entered that. You told me that. But one of the things I really enjoyed listening to on your program were the book reviews. They were just fantastic. And they're just so well put together. And I sent links to your book reviews to my nieces and nephews so that they could listen to it as well.
Oh, no way.
But it did occur to me that someday you might want to write a book. I mean, I think the interviews are great, but I think the book reviews are even better, because that's all you. That's you having to put all those together. And so my question is, because you like reading so much and because your book reviews are so good, do you think you might write a book one day?
Well, I have an idea in mind that I didn't really want to write a book. But I wanted to write maybe like a kind of story that I could maybe like print it out and put it like, kind of make a kind of like leather bound kind of book. And I'd like to show it to people. It's basically, we done this as a school project.
Yeah.
And I think it was like, you were supposed to do 2 pages. I was a total Hermione Granger, and I did 6. And I love this idea about a poor plebeian. And I decided I wanted to make a story, and I did. And I set up the base story. And I'm going to finish that off soon, because it was kind of scrapped. I want a sequel about Julius Caesar dies, and the guy's son is like 30 years after. The ending of the first story is kind of like they have a shop. They make a shop after escaping their insula falling down, because their insula, it falls down and they barely make it out alive, and they walk loads, and then they finally get to a nice place, and they set up a shop. And then it's like 12 years later, or it's a good time later when his son's kind of like in his teenage years. And the end of the second chapter is when a little girl's coming up the shop who is friends with the teenager, and it's around her age. And they go, "Can I have some bread and everything?" And then an old lady just screams in the street, "Julius Caesar's dead!" And then it's like chapter 3. There was silence at the dinner table. I kind of wanted to make it really dramatic, but then I kind of scrapped the idea because I was going, "What?" when I was writing it.
And you really like Roman history, ancient history?
I love history. My favorite show, probably of all time, Horrible Histories.
Yes.
It's so like my granddad told me he actually sat down and he started binge watching Horrible Histories, and he loves it, and we love it. Here at my house, my sister and I love it. And I always thought it's so funny. And then I read the books and I just went, "God, the books are brilliant!" And then I made a stunning discovery after kind of looking through a couple of bios and doing a bit of maths. I realised the author's 70 now.
Wow.
Terry Deary, who wrote things, was 50 when he done them.
Right.
So now he's 70. And
that's nearly as old as Paul McCartney or Mick Jagger.
I know, exactly. We're talking about these old lads, and then we talk about Horrible History. Well, we've got one right here, and then he's actually in the movie of Horrible Histories.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
He's coming along.
Do you do reviews of movies as well?
I don't, actually, and I was always thinking to do them, but oh my god.
Now, well, that would be a good thing to do a review.
Yeah, actually, definitely a film review on that. It's 13 plus. It's actually PG. It's just because there was violence and alcohol use. Somebody drank a little bit of wine, and then language as in shut up.
And that's
so they called it the overrating, but it's PG, but
well,
Rattus at the start with the toilet seat around him and the 2 brushes, and he's going like the lion. It's just so it's one of those films that are so bad it's good.
It's so bad it's good. You see, that was like a little review of the movie right there. So I think you could do movie reviews. Well, what I'll do, let's make a deal.
Yeah.
Let's make a deal. I'll watch Horrible Histories, and you see if you can find the Beatles film Help. And see if you enjoy that, and you can.
I'll have to try and find Help now, just to check it out for the crack. You'll watch Horrible Histories, and I'll watch Help.
There we go, and we can exchange. We can exchange our opinions. We can give it a star rating on Twitter. So you're going to write the book, but it's going to be a kind of like a privately published thing, and just one book, and then people will show it to people.
I'm 11. I'm not going to do such a good job of it, so.
Well, the other thing I thought
just give it to one person. If they like it, grand. Another person like it, grand.
Yeah. Well, that's a good way. That's a good way to do it. The other thing I thought you could do, whenever I was your age, we didn't have the internet, and if you want to find out
internet.
I know.
All the children watching, it is true. I'm sorry.
Imagine how terrible it was to have no internet, and so if I wanted to find out about the Beatles or about the Rolling Stones, or if Gorillaz had been around and I wanted to find out about Gorillaz, I had no way of finding anything except to go and buy a magazine or to go and buy a book. And I thought, the little reviews that you do and the star ratings and things like that, there's a book there.
Yeah.
Or maybe on whenever you get your website, you can do like a little kind of reviews.
That reminds me of some reviews. I actually done artist reviews at one stage, and I done Joy Division on one, and I looked at Permanent, and some of the songs on there are amazing. But I done a Kate Bush one, and I watched a documentary about Kate Bush.
Mm-hmm.
It changed my life. It was actually amazing, and now I love Kate Bush's music because of it. And of course, now everybody knows Running Up That Hill. Because of Stranger Things, which, to be honest, is a very stupid reason.
Yes.
They should just know her because she's so good. And then one song that's very underestimated and very underplayed is called Army Dreamers. Or search up Kate Bush Comic Relief. Wow.
Right.
And it would show her bouncing around going, wow! And it's hilarious. It's actually so funny, but so good at the same time. And everybody's laughing at her because you can see the strings lifting her up.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's great. You see, you like Kate Bush before everybody else found her on Stranger Things.
And things like Babushka.
Babushka, yeah.
Yeah, great song. And then I remember seeing something where they had a keyboard. They had like this keyboard. And they went, so if Kate wants like a sound, we can put it into this keyboard. And then it showed the guys going, and somebody got a bottle and they went, smash! And then they went, okay. And on the keyboard, then it went, on the keyboard. They heard the smash noise. So you know the smashes in Babushka? Like
yes.
That's what that came from. A little keyboard and a man on a documentary.
Well, I did not know that. So there, you told me something I didn't know. Do you listen to, whenever you listen to Kate Bush, or whenever do you listen to them on CD or records or Spotify?
Well, I don't have it on CD. Spotify. Kate Bush, unfortunately, the kick inside was lost, I think. And actually, the man. See, I'm very messed up in my mind right here. The nerves. But the guy who was teaching her to dance, he was a very good dancer now. And she sent him the record, the kick inside.
Okay.
So yeah, he got the kick inside, I think, very early when it was released. And he loved it, and he just went, wait, is that Kate? Looking at it. And then the only reason why Kate Bush is so big is because of David Gilmour, because he came along. And I think so a lot of people would say that, and I will too, but at the same time, she wrote 100 songs without David. So, you know?
If you look on, there's a YouTube clip where I think she sings Running Up That Hill, and David Gilmour is playing guitar with her.
Oh, wow.
So you should see if you could find that.
That'd be very majestic.
And you see, that brings us back to Pink Floyd, which is your first record. So
exactly. We're having a little cycle thing going on.
That was very professional, the way you brought that back to Pink Floyd.
Yeah, that's totally what I was trying to do. Have you got any other questions before we go?
I don't think so. I think you've answered all my questions. I'm just do want to say how much I enjoy your podcast. And I'm really glad that you followed me on Twitter, because then that has kind of given me a whole new podcast to listen to. And I hope. So,
thank you so much anyways for coming on.
It's my pleasure.
It was very fun to talk to you. And to be honest, I was very nervous before it. As it was during the interview, I was spluttering some stuff. But we got to finish it anyways. And I hope you enjoyed actually talking to me as well. And I'll have to see you on Twitter. And we'll have to talk about the Horrible Histories movie. And this you'll get when you watch it. But this interview was brilliant, quite brilliant. You'll get that when you watch the movie.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much. And if you let me know when you're going to put this up on the podcast, and then I will put a link up on our website.
Brilliant.
And hopefully some people that listen to our podcast will listen to your podcast. And hopefully some people who listen to your podcast will find our podcast. That's how it works.
We'll have a bit of a link here.
A bit of a link.
A link
up.
Well, thank you, Steven. It's been such a pleasure. And to tell you now, I will look at the Beatles in a whole different way.
That's my work is done.
Not just a little Beatle car now. Also, I'll think of not only Deirdre Neithune, but Steven.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
See you, Steven. Have a great day. Goodbye.
You too. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Logan Sounds Off. And if you have any questions or requests, you can email logansoundsoff@gmail.com.